Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Bani Israel, chapter 17, verses 78 to 82 we will cover today. And the main theme of today's presentation is Establish Salat, the Quranic perspective. So I've tried to give it a bit detailed treatment. Let us see how it goes. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any query or question about any of our presentations. Recap verses 71 to 77. The results of collective human deeds appear in this world on a continuous basis. The world of 2024 is based on all that has happened in the past few centuries, and we can easily figure this out in the light of the functioning of the law of requital. Allah does not do injustice to mankind. It is human beings themselves who create problems for themselves. And we can see this clearly in today's world, particularly with the social media so active, and where past good and bad both are coming out very clearly in front of us. The law of Allah is that those who choose to remain blind in this life will be raised up blind in the life of the hereafter, i.e., the state of their self in which they left this life at the time of death. They will rise in the same state in the life hereafter. We covered this aspect in fair amount of detail, and it will appear before us subsequently as well. But when we are explaining it to others, we should put an emphasis on that whatever we do over here, and that is exactly will affect ourself, and that is how we will acquire a new self. And then with that self, we will rise up in the hereafter. This can be easily figured out by understanding the Quran and its value system. This is not otherworldly. The state of development of the collective selves in the world can be evaluated using the criteria noted in the book. People who do not like the message of the Quran use all kinds of tricks and tactics to oppose it. However, if mu'mineen remain firmly on the path of Allah, then success is bound to come in their direction. This is an immutable law of Allah. The path of those who rise up for the cause of Allah is described in the Quran, and since the laws of Allah are immutable, help materializes in direct proportion to their efforts. And some of this aspect will also be covered today. An overview of today's presentation. In order to establish the system of Deen, a methodical procedure needs to be followed, which initially requires a very high understanding of the Quran as guidance. Without understanding it as a system, to establish Salat means this. Merely reading it will not lead to any change in the outer world. For enhancing this understanding, continuous effort is required, both individually as well as by coming together. If necessary, then studying and analyzing various issues in the early morning and also a part of the night also helps. All this needs to be pursued with one aim and motivation, that you wish to replace the existing man-made system with the system of Deen as defined by the Quran. Because Quran puts so much emphasis on having a very clear aim of life. And the aim which Quran has put forward is the system of Deen and its values within which that system should be managed. For this, continuously desire that no step is taken which is not in line with the defined path. After pursuing this path, as noted here, a stage will definitely arrive when it will become evidently obvious that Batil is bound to be replaced by Al-Haq. This is bound to happen as darkness vanishes when light dawns. And we will look at Batil and Al-Haq in more detail subsequently. The whole purpose of sending down guidance through the Quran is that those among mankind who are dissatisfied with the man-made system can establish the system of Deen by following its guidance. And this is a very important statement, because we do get dissatisfied with the man-made system. But if we are not totally dissatisfied, then we are not going to look for an alternative system. And we try to think that since I am a beneficiary of this system, hence a bit of adjustment within this system will be fine. This is a complete code of life which guides the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen in the establishment of Al-Haq. And system of Salat is part of that al-haq. That is, the constructive results must come out through our efforts. If there are no constructive results, then that means we are doing batil. In short, well-defined, measured steps and marks the path with tangible signs. Those who do not acquire conviction in this path defined by Allah, for them there is only loss in this life and nothing in the hereafter. This point also needs a lot of reflection as we go through the Quran, because apparently it looks that not much is changing in the life of those who are totally absorbed in the man-made system. First verse of today's presentation, 1778, establishing Salat using the Quranic context. Aqimis salata liduluki shamse ila ghasakil layle wa Quran al-Fajr. Inna Quran al-Fajr kana mashhuda. But this will not happen automatically. You will have to strive persistently for this. Your program should be that in the early morning before the sun rises, reflection and reasoning should be carried out in the Quranic facts, and it should be noted what guidance is received from there regarding the matters facing you. Early morning for the reason that in the peace and quiet of the Fajr time, that is the morning time, sunrise or before sunrise, there is such an intense focus and single-mindedness in human thoughts from which Quranic facts can appear before us in a tangible and visible form, and the heart provides spontaneous evidence of their truthfulness. After this, to remain acting on this program from sunrise until dusk, i.e. from morning to night. For this purpose, such assemblies should also be organized in which affairs can be decided through mutual consultations. Further reflections on this verse 1778. Let us first look at the commonplace translation of this verse. Establish regular prayers at the sun's decline till the darkness of the night, and the morning prayer and reading. For the prayer and reading in the morning carry testimony. Now, if we look at these verses, which have a great significance within the domain of religion, then this is taken to be carrying out worship. Whereas Quran is pointing towards the system, and that will become clear as we go through these slides. As we will see in verse 1781, the Quran is declaring that through the procedure outlined in verses 78 to 80, Batil is vanishing and Al-Haq is going to replace it. We can see that with the commonplace kind of translation given above, there is no chance that the replacement of Batil by Al-Haq can ever take place. Because unless our inner psyche changes, unless our own thoughts change, and we think that this is a means towards getting an aim, if this worship becomes an aim in itself, then people are not going to make effort. If the human mind does not even think of the issue in precise terms in the first place, then how can it ever act correctly on it? The correct meaning of Aqimis Salat is to establish the system of Salat, which requires strenuous efforts during day and night, from morning till the dark hours. This also refers to the parts of the Quranic message which were being revealed to the messenger at that time and which he was in turn sharing with them. That point we should keep in mind, that when these verses were revealed, they were coming in small batches, and Mu'mineen had to come together and discuss through them their implications, what is there for their future, and how the system is going to materialize. Human thinking is affected by the environment, and with the kind of challenging environment faced by the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, therefore it is important to meet up and discuss the revelation in great detail. Now let us look at root of Salat. Now there are two roots of this, and I have noted both over here. It's worth going through the Lugatul Quran. Middle part of the back, that part of an animal where the tail is attached. In a horse race, when the number 2 horse is running behind the leading horse with its head is in line with its back, the horse in front is called Sabiq and the one behind is called Al-Musalli. From this, Salah means to follow behind closely, and that is important. Salat is taken from this meaning, that to follow behind someone else who is ahead of you, walking behind the one in front in such a way that there is no gap between the two, but the one following behind should not go ahead of the one in front. And that is where the Quran becomes our guide. That Quran is in front of us and we are following all the tenets which are given in the book. From this, the meaning in relation to the Quran will be to obey the laws of Allah. The meaning of Salat will be to connect with the commands of Allah, remaining within the limits defined by Allah and remaining in touch with the book of Allah. And it will become very clear as well, because I have quoted some verses from the Quran, that Salat in itself, the way it has appeared in the Quran, it guides itself even without knowing the root, because it is part of the system. And if we look at the cause and effect, then we will be able to figure it out, that what kind of changes must take place by following this system of Aqim Salat. From this brief summary, the fundamental meaning of Salat becomes clear, i.e., it is to obey the laws of Allah. This will be the meaning of Aqim Salat. Everything in the universe carries out its tasks. And I have quoted this verse later because I thought that it is worth looking at it, that how the Quran has presented the overall picture of the universe before us and how it functions. Alam tara anna Allaha yusabbihu lahu man fis samawati wal ardi wal tayru safatin kullun qad alima salatahu. See you not that it is Allah whose laws are followed in the heavens and the earth and the birds with wings. Each one knows its own salat. So if we look at the universe and even what is going on within the world in which we are residing, that everything follows laws. For further details, see Lughatul Quran. Some verses on the purpose of Salat. Here I have quoted some verses from the Quran which point to the purpose of Salat, that is Aqim Salat, that why should we establish the system of Salat. One function of the system of Salat is Atlu ma uhiya ilayka minal kitabi wa aqim salata inna salata tanha anil fashai wal munkar. Recite what is sent of the book by wahi to you, establish Salat, for Salat restrains from shameful and unjust deeds. And we can see that how cause and effect is established. It is part of the functioning of the law of requital, that if system of Salat has been established, then there will be no fasha and munkar. And of course, this is part of the system of Deen. Individuals, even if they forbid evil and promote good, it doesn't make much difference in a society which is infested with evil. Another verse, Allazina in makannahum fil ardi aqamus salata wa atuz zakata wa amaru bil ma'rufi wa nahwa anil munkar wa lillahi aqibatul umur. A very comprehensive verse. Those who, if we establish them in the land, establish Salat and execute Zakat, enjoin right and forbid wrong, and all their affairs are related back to Allah, that is to His laws. Very important. And this clarifies the whole system of Deen, that why should Mu'mineen acquire a piece of land where they can create a model of Deen for others to see and others to witness. In verse 1187, Qalu ya Shoebu aslatuka tamuruka an natruka ma yabudu abavna aw nafala fi amwalina ma nashao. And this is in relation to the people of Shoaib. Messenger told his people that we should establish Salat. And they initially thought that it is some kind of a worship. But when he clarified it and insisted on this system, then they said, O Shoaib, does your Salat command you that we give up worship which our forefathers practiced? Because they didn't want to. Worship means it's a cop-out. Nothing changes in the society. Exploitation continues and idol worshipping goes on. Or that we leave off doing what we like with our possessions. And that is where the crux was. Because the Salat which was put forward by the messenger Shoaib wanted them to change their economic system of exploitation. The system of Salat will follow individual acts of sharing wealth with those who are left deprived and poor in society. And I've quoted this verse 177, part of it, because we have gone through it as well, because it's a progressive system. Initially it is individual, then it becomes collective. وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ وَالسَّائِلِينَ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ. To spend of your wealth despite love for it. Very important point. We have gone through it before as well. that at a default position, human beings have affection for money, and that is why they are greedy. And over here, Quran is asking us to go against it because we have accepted Iman. And we want to establish that system in which everything beyond need is taken care of, beyond need is handed over to the state, and the state takes care of everyone. For your kin, for orphans, for the needy, for those who ask, and for release of those who are enslaved. And then after this individual acts, Quran says, establish Salat. Because through those individual acts, we will come to this conclusion that the system has to be changed. It is not a question of individual charity works. It is a question of the whole system fundamentally has to change. Now, a few more verses on this. Good deeds replace the effects of wrong acts, and this should be part of the system of Salat. For example, in this verse, Quran says, وَاقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ طَرْفَ النَّهَارَ وَزُلَفًا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. Just see how Quran mentions day and night completely, because for Mu'mineen, day and night cannot be differentiated. It means that 24/7 the system has to function. And that is how at even individual level, we should pay attention to these things on a continuous basis. And establish Salat at the two ends of the day and at the approaches of the night. For those things that are good, remove those that are evil. Again, part of the system that should be established and promoted so that people realize that if they have done something wrong, they have to do a lot of good to compensate for that. Of course, under the system of Deen, whole of this will be, there will be sub-laws formulated or legislated for this. Another verse brings an Iman in Allah and in the hereafter as part of the system to be established. For example, this is from verse At-Tawbah. Innama ya'muru masajid Allahi man amana billahi wal yawmil akhiri wa aqamas salat. The mosques, that is the masajid of Allah, and over here mosques will be institutions of the system of Deen, shall be visited and maintained as part of the system of Deen by those who have Iman in Allah and the hereafter, and they will establish Salat. Now, this is a very interesting verse which continues from 9:18 and it is 9:19. Following on from the above in verse, I will go through the meaning of it. Do you make the giving of drink to pilgrims or the maintenance of the Masjid al-Haram equal to those who have Iman in Allah and the last day? See how Quran has rejected all rituals over here. It says that do not be distracted by doing some physical things in the precincts of Masjid al-Haram where you are feeding those who are coming over there for a visit and think that this is a great rewarding thing they are doing. Quran says no. Equal to those who have Iman in Allah and the last day and strive with might and main in the cause of Allah. Because these things are, these ritualized things do not change anything in the human world. What changes is to have that Aqim as-Salat, that is the system of Deen established so that human beings, they earn that respect which they deserve it. And there is nobody who is needy and everyone is given an opportunity to develop their self. They are not equal in the sight of Allah. And this is, I've highlighted over here at the end, Quran says, Wallahu la yahdil qawm az-zalimin, that if you're not focused and you are paying attention to those things which are non-productive and do not bring any change in the society, then you become unjust. You are among zalimin. So we have to be very, very careful in our conduct. Because over here, then Quran says, Allah guides not those who are unjust. If we read both verses together, we can figure out that these rituals are the ones which cause distraction. And Quran calls this distraction as going in the direction of being unjust, because we are not focused and we forget the purpose of our life. Congregations for establishing Salat. An example of this gathering is in verse 62:9. Quran says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu iza nudiya lis-salati min yawmil jum'ati fas'aw ila zikrillahi wa dharul bay' zalikum khairul lakum in kuntum ta'lamun. We have gone through this whole surah, but over here I have quoted it just to point out again, O those who have accepted Iman, when the call for Salat on the day of congregation is announced. So see, there is no fixing of date. It says that when there is supposed to be a congregation, and you are called out towards that. And in Surah An-Nisa, I've quoted that verse later on, the Quran says that Salat is for the appointed time. So it is not something which is done as a ritual, but it has to be a gathering for a specific purpose. Hasten earnestly to the zikr of Allah and leave off business. That is best for you if you but knew whole of the Quran is zikr of Allah for mu'mineen. And we know about the Quran, that Quran, Allah has said that this Quran is your own zikr, for your own eminence and loftiness in life. In terms of the verses related to the congregations for Salat, see verses, for example, 6 to 11 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, addressing the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, Deen as a system in place, starting from the procedure for ablution to keep clean. And that verse makes it very clear. The Quran presents before us certain aspects of the process of establishing the system of Deen. And if we read these verses, it becomes very clear that what is stated in verse 6 is subsequently clarified. For example, obedience of the laws, fulfilling agreements, Iman plus solid deeds, benefits of following the laws of Allah. And that is how we should read all these congregations which are quoted in different parts of, in the initial parts of the Quran. This essentially means that all those verses which mention gathering for Salat, these are not ritualized congregations, but are part of the system of Deen. Even in secular systems, those who wish to make decisions need to meet up as per schedule and agenda. No meeting takes place without a clear aim and objective. All planning and execution of serious projects is preceded by a number of meetings to work out details. And we should also look at this verse where timing is mentioned. Now let us go to the next verse, 1779. Individuals leading the system of Deen need to remain highly motivated and focused. وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَتَهَجَّدْ بِهِ نَافِلَةً لَكَ عَسَىٰ أَن يَبْعَثَكَ رَبُّكَ مَقَامًا مَحْمُودًا. And if the requirement of the circumstances is ever greater than this, then you can also remain awake for part of the night for this purpose and ponder and evaluate further on these matters. This additional time is particularly for you. This is because the leader of a caravan has far greater responsibilities, though if required, other members of the Ummah can also be included in this. And there are verses on that where others also join in the messenger. If you strive strenuously in this way for the establishment of this system, then the time is not far when you will become established at that lofty stature due to which the world will spontaneously rise up and declare that the status of the one calling towards the system of Rububiyyat of Allah should most certainly be worthy of appreciation and admiration like this. Very important point, it should not be individualized, but it should be seen as in relation to the system of Deen, that what the Quran is asking us to do. Further elaboration of this verse. By relating to the difficult circumstances under which we are striving to learn about the Quran, we can imagine the great difficulties and uphill struggle which this small Jamaat of Mu'mineen headed by the Messenger was facing at that time. So we should keep in mind that what is happening at that time when these verses were being gradually revealed to the Messenger and everyone was coming together and then paying attention to that, the previous batch as well as the current one. The Quran was in the process of being revealed in small segments, and with every revelation, they were coming together and discussing and reflecting on all its aspects. There's a great instruction for us as well that we have to come together as and when we need to. And presently, for example, we are going through these verses with a view to understand the system of Deen and its outline. Let us look at the common translation of this verse and pray in the small watches of the morning. It would be an additional prayer for you. Soon will your Rabb raise you to a station of praise and glory. Now, I quoted these translations because before coming to the Quran, or should I say before reading Allama Parvez, I myself used to read these verses and in fact memorize them. And these were only seen in the context of rituals. And that is the sad part of it. that over here there's the revolutionary aspect of Deen of Islam is being presented by the Quran, and we somehow get distracted and go to the easy path. Despite the appearance of the attribute of Rabb here, due to the absence of any focus on Rububiyyat, the easy route to doing nothing has been taken. That is the emotive path, not rational one. And emotive path, because it satisfies our emotions, we somehow think that is the end in itself. If I feel happy and contented with doing something without seeing that what positive change it has brought in the outer world. If there is no positive change in the outer world for centuries, that means we should reconsider the whole issue of Salat. With these translations, no change can take place in the human psyche, hence no self-development is possible. Why I say that? Because I know my own psyche when followed this path of rituals previously before coming to the Quran. And there is a revolutionary change in the human self when we look at the previous position and the position now in the light of the Quran. The verse should also be analyzed in reverse order. It is stated towards the end, Asa an yabasaka rabbuka maqamam mahmuda. What is being said earlier will lead to establishing that system for which the Quran is being revealed, i.e. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Because Allah's Rububiyyat for whole of mankind can only manifest when we go through the Quran and follow it. And that is, see, if Mahmuda and Alhamd both have same root of Hamd. And that is where we have to put an emphasis and put our focus so that we understand that what Quran is saying. It is not about individual achievement. It is about the system itself. The establishment of the system of Rububiyyat needs to be the focus of the messenger and his companions. And why we say that? Because that is how, by reading and acting on these verses and the whole of the Quran, they were able to establish the system of Deen. Few more comments on this verse 79. We can see that by keeping in mind what is stated in the first chapter, that is Surah Al-Fatiha, this helps us to remain focused on the aim of the rest of the Quran. It is not about getting any self-praise and loftiness. We should never ever go in that direction, because system of Deen is not about individual salvation and achievement and Jannat or paradise or anything. It is about relieving mankind from all those chains which are put around their necks due to the man-made systems. Here is a task which we volunteer to accept, and then we need to remain motivated to keep advancing forward on this chosen path. When Allah declares that this will be accomplished if the defined path is followed, then Mu'mineen simply cannot give up. Here the messenger is fully assured that the goal of Deen is within his reach. Now going back to the first part, وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَتَهَجَّدْ بِهِ نَافِلَةً لَكَ. How reassuring it is that Allah is watching and then letting the messenger know that it is fine to extend your brainstorming sessions a bit longer into the hours of the night. And Quran has given us full authority that when you are on this path, you should spend more time if it is required. Don't waste it, but look at every finer aspect of what is being revealed. And that is exactly what we are doing over here. That is sharing the finer aspects of these verses from the perspective of the system of Deen. As this is the initial era of the establishment of the system of Deen, and this current effort will lead to better conditions on this path later. Continuing, the aspect of Allah watching is noted in, for example, verse 1061, وَمَا تَتْلُو مِنْهُ مِنْ قُرْآنٍ وَلَا تَعْمَلُونَ مِنْ عَمَلٍ إِلَّا كُنَّا عَلَيْكُمْ شَهُودًا إِذْ تُفِيدُونَ فِيهِ. And whatever portion you may be reciting in order to obey, because that includes, the obedience is included in this word tatlu from the Quran. Whatever deed you may be doing, we are witness thereof when you are deeply engrossed therein. See how reassuring it is that Allah is saying that while you are discussing the Quran and when you are following it according to your circumstances, Allah is a witness continuously that His laws will not leave you alone. His laws are there to help you. Following on from verse 1777, it is made clear that the laws of Allah do not change. وَلَا تَجِدُوا لِسُنَّتِنَا تَحْوِيلًا. We had gone through this verse, but I thought to re-quote it just to reiterate it. You will find no change in our ways. Verses 78 to 79 should be analyzed in continuity with this fact that since the laws and practices of Allah do not change in the domain of creation, that is khalq, then how can we draw maximum benefits from this setup? We need to bring our psyche in line with the Quranic value system and then direct our efforts towards the establishment of the system of Salat as part of the system of Deen. By keeping this context in mind, these verses lead to a higher understanding. Because when the whole point of higher understanding is to convince ourselves, and we should not stop in acquiring this higher understanding till the time we are fully convinced, fully committed, and there is no iota of doubt in our mind that this is the path for us. Next verse 1780, acquire a very high level of awareness. وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَدْخِلْنِي مُدْخَلَ صِدْقٍ وَأَخْرِجْنِي مُخْرَجَ صِدْقٍ وَاجْعَلْ لِي مِن لَّدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا. According to this program, in struggles with the opposing forces, and there will always be opposing forces, some of those opposing forces we know are within our own self, that is the proclivities initially of our own desires, where we think that this is not possible, and then we gradually convince ourselves, and then of course others oppose as well. And of course they are obstruction as well. And we also can become initially discouraged that if others do not come to the pure Quran, and we think that there is something wrong over here. Your desire should be that if your step advances forward, it should do so with truth and justice. And from where your step retreats, even then it should be with truth and justice. Whether victory or defeat, you should never let go of the handhold on truth and justice. And whatever place and state you may be in, you should have support and supremacy through the laws of Allah. This should be your continual wish and permanent desire. Further reflections on this verse. This verse sums up the stressful task being faced by the messenger and his companions. Here the Quran has itself taught the way to think after acknowledging the inner feelings about the difficult task ahead. The beauty of this verse is that we are asked to address Rabb in order to obtain guidance about our mission. The wording of this guidance covers aspects of striving on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. Whatever task is lying ahead, it should be carried out by keeping in view the domain of the permanent values and to never seek shortcuts or cut corners. This will be disastrous because all our efforts will go wasted. For example, what we are doing in terms of understanding this Quran on this platform, coming together and trying to understand the system of Deen, if we give up, then all our previous efforts will also go waste. And giving up means that despite having all the means, all the resources, we do not carry forward and see that how whole thing materializes in the future. We can now see the link here with the previous two verses. The revelation has arrived and the team has come together and draws out a detailed plan. Through discussions, the threats and opportunities and risks are assessed and countermeasures are taken. Duties are assigned to various members of the team. Few more comments on this verse. By concluding the verse, وَجَعَلْ لِي مِن لَّدُنْكَ سُلْطَانًا نَصِيرًا, asking Rabb for aid, that is asking and praying to Rabb, Allah, that provide us help for aid in this pursuit of the system of Rububiyyat. This points to discussion and planning for the means of sustenance and support, which is then resourced through team members. So it is not going to come down from the heavens. We have to make efforts from within the means available to us as a team. It is not about waiting for some unseen divine help as is generally believed in the domain of the religious belief system. Not at all. There is no miracle here. When we seek Allah's help, it means we have to help our own self. It is a human word and human beings will have to create this help themselves. In order to establish the system of Deen, the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen is exhorted to be extremely creative and resourceful, and this will lead to success. Here we quote in support of the above another verse, very powerful verse. وَأَعِدُّ لَهُم مَّا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ وَمِن رِّبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَّ اللَّهِ وَعَدُوَّكُمْ وَآخَرِينَ مِن دُونِهِمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَهُمُ اللَّهُ يَعْلَمُهُمْ. Again, against them make ready your strength to the utmost of your power, including sinews of war, to strike terror into the hearts of enemies and others besides, whom you may not know, but whom Allah does know. And just see that how Quran is pointing to this fact that when mu'mineen, they come together and do it, then Allah's wholehearted, complete help is available to them. The Quran is counseling us to find out as much as possible about the world in which we live, and this endeavor should never slacken. And over here, Quran says that your enemies and the enemies of Allah. That means it has become a team. It has become a companionship, the everlasting companionship which will go into the hereafter. Any setbacks on this path will be temporary if the path is pursued together. It does not mean that in this struggle there will not be setbacks. There are always setbacks. And we have seen it all along this path which we are pursuing by coming together and going through the Quran as a system of Deen, that people will come and people will leave. But that should not cause any distraction or any discouragement. Because if we stick to this path and we are fully convinced, then we should stay here and see to the end. Next verse, 1781. Batil is always on a weak foundation. Very reassuring verse. وَقُلْ جَعَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Set out on this program, and after this announce clearly to your opponents that now the era for the system of haqq and truth has arrived and the era of the destructive forces of batil has ended. This is because degenerative forces can only remain in place up until the time that constructive forces of haqq and truth do not come into action. In their presence, destructive forces simply cannot remain in place. Further reflections on this verse. Human beings expect results at the end of their efforts. In the physical domain of khalq, results appear before us quite quickly. For example, if we are legislating man-made laws, when these are implemented, we can see the results in a short period of time. The Quran invites us to look at the long-term effects of these man-made laws and declares these to be batil because these are against the permanent values. An important point over here, because any legislation which is being done within the man-made system, because there is a system in place at the top and the people at the top have the power, so they can implement these laws. In fact, they can even go against their own laws without legislating anything. They can formulate anything because the whole machinery of police and army and the power is with them. And we can see that very clearly being demonstrated in today's world in various countries. Why batil? Because the Quranic system of Rububiyat is for the whole of mankind and it does not exclude any human being from its domain of operation. And that is very important because sometimes people say that there is some kind of an Islam in the West. And this is because they simply do not understand the Quran and they do not look at the mankind and the problems which are being created. Hopefully in today's world, when all evil of the past and present is coming out very clearly through social media, that myth can disappear and people can look at it more objectively, i.e. one law for the rich and another for the masses. However, since the system has to initially establish itself in human minds and then in some piece of land, just like a seed, blossom from there slowly and surely, hence it appears to be impossible. And because there is batil everywhere, that does not mean that haqq cannot germinate, haqq cannot take shape. Haqq does take shape when we come to the Quran, come together and start going through it as a system of Deen. This is why the emphasis is so much on changing the human psyche, as without it, the outer world simply cannot change. Even if we are beneficiaries of the batil system, if we figure out the details of the system of Deen, that is al-Haq, then we can logically see that the al-Haq has all that is required for its success. Never mind how powerful batil is. Al-Haq has divine support through the immutable laws and the universe which is created for this purpose. We have to keep reminding ourselves all the time that this world is not meant to be the way it is. Haq has to come. And by understanding the system of Deen, we are going through the first phase of learning about the Deen, and this is part of our striving for Haq. Few more points of interest on this verse. When the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen go through the preliminary stages of self-development together and verify these using the Quranic criteria, they start to see the outline of the system in their psyche. And this is an important point, because if the changes have taken place within our mind, within our self, within our memory, and we see that we are not the same human being who started on this path, and now we have seen the improvement in our understanding, that means we are progressing. That is not a time to give up. In fact, there is no time to give up as far as the path of Al-Haq is concerned. It is the only path which will take us to success in this life and the life of the hereafter. As and when the system starts to take shape in any land and gradually acquires power in the land, then they let the opponents know about the system of Batil and its limitations. And this will arrive at some point in the future. Here the messenger is asked to announce to everyone around that Batil is vanishing and is being replaced by Al-Haq, and that it is in the nature of Batil to fade away when Deen arrives. The Quran has used the metaphor of darkness for Batil and light for Al-Haq. And when the light comes, we have seen darkness disappears. And over here, we should keep in mind that the continuity of these verses from 78 to 81, there could be a big time gap, many years between that. But that doesn't matter. In terms of striving on this path, this disappears because it becomes a continuous striving on this path. In another place, Bal naqzifu bil haqqi alal batile fayadmagu faiza huwa zahikun. Nay, we hurl haq against batil, and it knocks out its brain, and behold, batil does perish. Beautiful verse. It is the ideologies of batil which are countered through the ideology of the haq. The last verse of today's presentation, 1782, the Quran has the recipe for replacing batil with al-haq. Very motivating verse. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِّلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. All this will take place according to that Quran, whose teaching will remove all the ailments of the hearts of the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. Their psychological weaknesses and internal conflicts will be eliminated, and the development of their potentials will take place positively in a highly excellent manner. Contrary to this, for those people who are resorting to rebelliousness against this and have adopted the path of injustice and tyranny, there will be multiplying in their means of destruction. The way in which the coming of the dawn is a deadly means of elimination for the darkness of the night. In the same way, through the establishment of the divine system based on truth and justice, there is annihilation of the forces of injustice and tyranny. Expanding this verse a bit further, in another related verse, Quran has said, Ya ayyuhan nasu qad ja'atkum maw'izatum min rabbikum wa shifa'un lima fis sudur wa hudan wa rahmatul lil mu'minin. We went through this verse 1057 under Surah Yunus, but I thought to quote it again. After addressing mankind and letting them know that this guidance has arrived from the direction of their Rabb, and this contains the prescription for their psychological ailments, which create problems in the world. We have gone through some of these aspects previously, and if followed will lead to providing guidance and nourishment. This responsibility will be taken over by the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, as they will be seeking its guidance. We have seen that the Quran has pointed to a number of human weaknesses, limitations, and vulnerabilities, which, if not addressed, will lead to psychological issues, which will in turn manifest in the outer world. And we can see these psychological limitations of all those people in power who have created so much mess in the world. This is why the Quran has informed us that Inna Allaha la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Verily, never will Allah change the condition of a nation until they change it themselves. It says that whatever is within their own self, unless that is changed, outer world will not change. And this is what we are trying to do on this platform. This means that if the world around us in 2024 contains problems, then we as students of the Quran need to study the human psyche which has created these problems. Then we need to look at the guidance provided by Allah to resolve these issues. Now, disease and its treatment. The disturbance in the balance and equilibrium of a system is called marad, or disease, due to which weakness appears in its energies. The returning of this system back to harmony is called shifa, that is the treatment. Word shifa is used in this verse, so in relation to that, what I've done is I've taken out this excerpt from the Bible Quran. The Quran has mentioned the physical ailments of man as well as the psychological diseases for which the term diseases of the heart has appeared. It has declared the character weakness of hypocrisy as a psychological disease and has noted that the Quran possesses the means for healing of psychological diseases, i.e., by acting on the program of the Quran, balance and equilibrium is created in the human self. The practical outcome of which is that balance and equilibrium are created in the society itself. Because it is only those can work for the system of Deen who have themselves acquired balance and equilibrium within their own self. The reality is that the aim and purpose of Quranic teaching is the development of the human self, the evidence-based form of which is the balanced personality. In this, there is no psychological complex. Need shifa for these ailments. Now, verse 210, fi qulubihim maradun fazadahumullahu marada. Over there, the Quran has pointed towards hypocrites that they have a disease in their heart, which is their psychological problem, because they do not know what they want from their life, and they are trying to get advantages on both sides by appearing to work with Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen and in fact working against them. Hypocrites have disease in their hearts, and as they face more failures, this disease keeps multiplying. And the problem with this kind of psychological ailments is that these, with the passage of time, become stronger and stronger and cause more and more problems. So Quran asks us to identify such people and to dissociate with them, because they can damage, hurt the Islamic movement for the system of Deen. In another verse, Quran says, فَتَرَ الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ يُسَارِعُونَ فِيهِمْ. Those in whose hearts is a disease, you will see how eagerly they run about amongst them. Such people wish to succeed in their efforts, subvert the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. I've only quoted part of these verses. It's worth looking at the verses before and after and see the whole context of these verses. Jealousy and rancor become created, and this is from Surah Al-Anfal. إِذْ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ غَرَّ هَؤُلَاءِ دِينُهُمْ. Lo, the hypocrites say, and those in whose hearts is a disease, these people, their deen has misled them. And these kind of comments we do hear from the domain of religion as well, that these people have become misguided and they have left the path of their forefathers, whereas they themselves are on the wrong, and it is because of their being on wrong that we see so much mess in the world. This disease state never stays the same. Instead, it keeps increasing in its intensity with time if left untreated. And we can see that it continues for centuries, and it will continue for centuries unless the whole thing comes to a stop and some forces of Haqq stand up against the system of Batil. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَتْهُمْ رِجْسًا إِلَىٰ رِجْسِهِمْ. But those in whose hearts is a disease, it will add doubt to their doubt. Because if we have doubts in our mind, then we cannot put our full focus and intensity on this path. And that is why Quran says that this is the book in which there is no raib, there is no doubt, there is no suspicion. It is very clear. It's not conjectural. It presents the reality the way reality is. It presents truth the way truth is supposed to be. So that thing we should keep in mind, because if there are doubts, if we are slightly have doubts that I don't know whether we can establish the system of Deen, can I be useful to the system of Deen, then that is the end of our struggle on this path. Rijs means doubt, suspicion, hesitation, anxiety, a matter being unclear, etc. Few more examples. Another verse notes this psyche. Afi qulubihim maradun amirtabu am yakhafuna an yahifallahu alayhim wa rasulahu bal ulaika humuz zalimun. Is it that there is a disease in their hearts, or do they doubt, or are they fear in Allah? Are they in fear that Allah and His Messenger will deal unjustly with them? This is the beautiful part of it. The more we pay attention to it, it becomes very clear that what Quran is telling us is that if you have doubts that Allah will not help you, this message will not help you, then that means that there is something wrong with your psyche. You have to work more. You have to work harder to clarify these positions through the presenting evidence. And just to see that, are you happy to live in this life that is the man-made system, or you want something different? And all Quran is asking at this stage is to understand the system, to make directed efforts, to change our own psyche, to convince ourselves. That is the first stage. If I'm not convinced about a path, then I'm not going to put in my best on that. It is they themselves who do wrong, and the Quran has called it unjust. People, because of their not paying full attention to this, they are the cause of continuation of batil in the world. People half-heartedly, that is hypocrites, come to the Quran and then say, "Wa'is yaqulul munafiquna wallazina fi qulubihim maradun ma wa'adana Allahu wa rasulahu illa gharura." And over here, we can say that because al-munafiquna wal-lazina, two different aspects can also be taken out of this verse, that they are hypocrites and others as well. Because these hypocrites are never alone. They have mushrikeen and kafirun and others with them as well. And behold, the hypocrites and those in whose hearts is a disease say, Allah and His Messenger promised us nothing but delusion. And we can see Quran is not delusion. Quran is factually presenting the man-made world before us and saying that, do you want an alternative system? Then come to Allah and His message and then see how things materialize for you. Interestingly, the same wording is used in relation to Iblis, and we did cover this verse previously. The Quran helps the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen to identify the psyche of those who oppose the establishment of the system of Deen. Hasibal lazina fi qulubihim maradun an lan yukhrijallahu azghanahum. Or do those in whose hearts is a disease think that Allah will not bring to light all their rancor? This is part of the functioning of the law of requital, to provide respite to others while strengthening own efforts. And it's very interesting. We have seen that by going through these verses of the Quran for the last few years, we have now identified that what kind of psyche creates problems and what kind of a psyche is useful for the system of Deen. And this is how gradually Quran reveals itself, its truths on us. Those who resort to injustice, their loss keeps becoming multiplied with time. The verse ends by stating, "Wala yazidu zalimina illa khasara." Those who pursue the path of injustice and tyranny and never think of halting, thinking they are not accountable, their psyche keeps becoming worse with time. We witness this aspect in the world of 2024, and this fact becomes evident from recent history. It's very interesting that people who are holding the reins of power in various countries, they continue doing wrong. Why do they continue? Why do they continue doing wrong? Because they think they are succeeding. Whereas Quran says they do not see the cliff which is coming in their way, and suddenly they will find themselves falling down the cliff. For example, despite defeats, failures, and decline, those in a position of power do not rationally view their decision-making, and intoxicated by power and wealth, continue to follow the path of perdition. Even other non-Quranic, more rational people see the obvious and warn them, but they refuse to listen and ignore these warnings. And we can see that on YouTube, that how many people on social media are giving warning to their governments, very highly intellectual people, but government has refused to listen to them. There is a great guidance here for students of the Quran that the law of requital is functioning and they should continue their efforts on Salat al-Mustaqim. And that is absolutely important for us to grasp this whole functioning of the law of requital, that while that is going on, we continue our effort. And at the same time, we keep an eye on these events and also listen to these people who are warning their own people in power. And this is going on virtually in every country. This part of the verse serves as a sign, and together with the earlier part, gives reassurance to the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen that nothing escapes the law of requital of Allah. And we should keep that in mind, that Allah is with those who strive on this path. Now over here I've drawn few schematics. First is representing verse 1782. Recognizing batil is essential before seeking guidance from the Quran. This is the stage of diagnosing the disease. And I think we have diagnosed the disease on this platform, that what is going on in the world in the light of the Quran. The Quran calls it mirth. All man-made systems are diseased, as the people who manage these systems possess that psyche which creates chaos and conflicts in the human world. And they all are psychologically diseased. And it's a fact. We can check it through the Quran, and we have gone through some of these symptoms. And so mu'mineen should never be surprised. Next is, having diagnosed the disease, we now apply the treatment put forward by the Quran, and this is called shifa. This is the whole process of understanding, plus coming together, plus education and training, plus striving on this path to establish the system of Deen. It is like a patient being treated with a prescription, and then once recovered, he needs recuperation. So there is a big task lying ahead of us, that while we are going through this, we should also keep in mind that what kind of challenges we will face later on. Once Deen starts to take shape in some piece of land, then the phase of Rahmat commences, which is like strengthening the immunity of a patient. Hereby stating Rahmatul lil Mu'mineen, the Quran has pointed to those aspects where both sustenance and development are covered, just like a child is fully supported in the womb of a mother. And this is beautiful because it is factual. When Quran says Rahman and Rahim and Rahmat, that means that it is available to those who strive on this path using the guidance of the Quran. While this process of the establishment of the system of Rububiyyat is progressing, the system of Batil gradually declines due to its refusal to accept Al-Haq. Both these processes proceed simultaneously. Al-Haq becomes tangible after a short time. At this time, we can see Batil everywhere, and we don't see Haq tangibly. But the fact that we are making that effort for the system of Deen and enhancing our understanding, that means this Haq is shaping up. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. Maybe we should remember it by heart. Let us look at these verses in reverse order. This came to my mind that proceeding forward from verse 77 or 78 to verse 82, if we look at the translations, they are very misleading. So let us look at it in reverse order. Verse 1782 says, the Quran spells out the details for the system of Deen. If these are followed, it will ensure treatment of all ailments and facilitate growth and development. Verse 1781, as and when mankind is fed up with Batil systems, Al-Haq can replace it, just like darkness disappears when light arrives. Verse 1780, rise together as a Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen and strive within the defined parameters. Verses 78 and 79, follow the procedure laid down in the Quran in initial stages, acquire Iman, and study the Quran as a system of Salat. Verse 1777, which we covered in our previous presentation, always keep in mind that Allah's laws do not change and are there to help Mu'mineen. Remember, if you find this word in the grip of Batil and you desire to change it, then follow the procedure noted in these verses and reiterated in many other places. This procedure of replacing Batil with Al-Haq is nothing new. All the messengers of Allah successfully countered Batil by following the Wahi of Allah. Al-Haq has the potential to counter Batil in all eras, in all times, because Allah is there, His book is there, and we are there, the same human beings who established these systems in the past can still establish these if we follow the procedure and process. Now, finally, look at some of the weaknesses of man and see what can we do using the light of Wahi. If we remember, we covered it under verse 1765. I thought to repeat it here just to remind ourselves. For man was created weak, and Quran has said that acquire strength through the Quran. becomes an open, clear disputer. We can see how much disputes and chaos and conflicts man creates. Resolve all differences through the book, and that is the job of Mu'mineen. Man is a creature of haste. Look at the long-term outcomes of every action in life. And this is a great testing time that we do not get distracted even with batil so powerful all around us. For man is given to hasty deeds, overcome the urge for quick results. There are no quick results on the path of haqq. We have to follow the path as defined by the Quran. For man is ever miserly, overcome greed and learn to share, acquire a moment psyche that is countering kufr, and whatever resources are required for this struggle of ours for haqq, we must make them available willingly, happily, as and when occasion arises. Truly, man was created very impatient. Deen as a system needs patience. A lot of patience is required not to get distracted, not to become emotive, not to become impulsive, not to become abusive or swearing or anything. Just putting our head down and get on to learning the system of Deen. But man is in most things contentious. Use the book for resolving issues of life. He was indeed unjust and foolish. Be just and acquire knowledge and vision. But man does transgress all bounds. Stop transgressing, learn about the law of requital. Truly man is to his Rabb ungrateful. And over here, Rabb means Rububiyat. That is, being ungrateful to Allah in words means nothing. Rububiyat means that whatever potentials we have, at this point in time, we should utilize them towards the system of Rububiyat and bring out our latent potentials and abilities. Come to grips with the system of Rububiyat. Create a self with new life, thus prove to yourself that Rabbana ma khalaqta haza batila. So we have to get plenty of evidence individually and collectively that Allah did not create this system of the universe and human beings in this world as batil. It is haqq, and if we strive for haqq, then all these cosmic forces and Allah's laws will support us. O our Rabb, you have not created it all this as batil, because if we look at the state of the world as today, it is batil and nothing can be changed. But the fact is that the Quran is giving us complete support and hope that it can change and it will change. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you.